We are talking to Colonel Mike Immler. He's a candidate for county judge, conservative candidate, for county judge. So ever since the current judge, his name is Clay Jenkins, he took office back in 2011. So that was over 15 years ago, and it's been the same administration ever since, right? Dallas County has faced so many challenges, like you have no idea. Crime has exploded, and this was during the COVID era. Yes, crime exploded everywhere, but like it's different. It's always different in your own city. But anyway, there was some heavy spikes on heavy crime, on homicide, auto thefts. We saw a lot of that too. But a lot of residents were left afraid to leave their residence, afraid to leave their own homes, which I totally understand. Homelessness skyrocketed. I have never seen it like this before since moving back. And I actually have a story. So I was driving down this street. It was to go and the other one was to come back. There was a homeless guy that was not well, and he was on the other side of the street, and he literally stood in the middle of the road in a Spider-Man pose, staring at incoming traffic going this way. I had a red light, so I saw it firsthand. Cars were swerving right and left to like not hit this guy. And that is so extremely dangerous. Thank goodness that I saw a cop right around the corner, so he was able to save the guy, honestly. But I've never in my life, and South Florida was really bad with homelessness too, but I haven't seen anything like this. And taxes are extremely high. So I think that the Dallas County tax rate is at 0.2155, whatever that means. But I did the research, so that's the number. South Dallas has been neglected for a really, really long time. 15 years. I think that's a pretty long time. There's limited economic growth. There's fewer opportunities for small businesses. And there's a feeling that the southern part of the county, it just gets kind of like the short end of the stick. So today, Colonel Immler, he's joining us to talk about the oversight, the fiscal responsibility, public safety, and his plan to bring a real change into the Dallas County. Colonel Mike Immler, thank you so much for joining us. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me here and giving me the opportunity to talk about what I'm going to do when I become the new Dallas County Judge.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being here. Colonel, question. So you've lived here in Dallas for over 40 years, right?
Yes, moved here in 1986. Came here to work for the Army and Air Force Exchange Service, which is our headquartered here in Dallas. That's a worldwide organization that takes care of military families, provides them a piece of home, America, wherever they may be stationed around the world. And so I came here as part of their general counsel's office. And then through a series of promotions and everything, I was able to kind of rise to the top. I was the number 2 person in this $8 billion a year organization that has that worldwide impact. So I retired from there in 2017.
Wow. So you have military experience. That's like your background, right?
So the military experience kind of overlaps the civilian. So it's a little bit of a Rubik's Cube, if you will. So after law school, I went into the Air Force and I served 5 years on active duty. Then I transitioned to the reserve component. And then I spent another 25 years there in the reserves and eventually retired from the Air Force in 2009 as a full colonel after that 30 years of service. My last assignment was in the Pentagon, where I got to work with a lot of senior folks and do some very unique, top secret stuff that unfortunately I can't talk about any still. So
that's awesome. Thank you so much for your service. I appreciate that. So then, what personally motivated you to run for Dallas County Judge?
Well, kind of a little bit of a long story, and if you bear with me, and I'll probably give you the Reader's Digest version.
Perfect. The floor is yours.
I've been doing government relations work for the Army and Air Force Exchange Service since about 1991. And I really got involved in working with folks in Washington, D.C., working with folks in Congress. Then I got the opportunity to start working with other foreign countries and their governments as we tried to expand our our footprint in both Germany and Asia. And so I really got the bug for working in the political arena. By the time I left APUS, I was overseeing our government relations, government affairs department. And then after APUS, I also worked briefly for First Command Financial and the head of their military affairs department, which then also worked with folks in Washington, D.C. and various government agencies. So I had this itch, I guess you would call it, for working in politics. And after I retired in 2024, I looked around and I thought I still have some desire to serve. And so I approached our county chair, and he asked me if I'd be willing to run for Dallas County Judge. And I jumped at the chance because there's an opportunity here to bring a lot of, I would say, new, innovative ideas to running government, make it more transparent, make it more accountable, and then just give people in Dallas County value for what they're asking from their government officials here in Dallas County.
That's actually what I want to talk about. That's the accountability of what's been happening with the current administration. The last time we spoke, you mentioned that, Clay Jenkins, as I mentioned in the intro, that he's been in this thing for like since 2011, right? But before him was Democrat Jim Foster, and that was from 2007 to 2010, right?
Yes.
Right. And so then it's like the administration, I think it went from bad to worse or from worse to bad. I just can't decide. And the only commonality that these two have are the fact that they're Democrats in that sense, and you're running for conservative. So what do you see is the biggest shortcoming of Jenkins, the current county judge?
Well, I don't want to get too personal about this, but there are some things that I would like to see changed that would make some really great improvements for the residents of Dallas County. First and foremost, I think that Dallas County Judge is essentially the CEO of the county. And as a CEO of the county, you're responsible for the operation of all the county services. You oversee the budget, you oversee the sheriff's department, the health department, hospitals, the jails, and then just the executive oversight that you have for all of the rest of the county government. But what I've seen is in the 14 years that Clay has been in office, we've had 12 increases in our tax rate. And that's just, what are we getting for our tax dollars? I don't think there's enough transparency or accountability for what the residents of Dallas County are getting for their tax dollars. In addition, there was pay raises for 12 of those 14 years that went to county officials, including the county judge, Mr. Jenkins. And so they got a pay raise for doing whatever they do without any accountability to the residents of Dallas County. But what really bothers me is that Mr. Jenkins also has his own private law firm that he's engaged in, and he's working through the law firm, operating that and running that. There's ads on TV, there's billboards with him around town, but yet he's a full-time county employee. So I question whether we're getting our full value out of the dollars we're spending on his salary and what he's doing for Dallas County. A lot of times what I see with Clay Jenkins is he shows up for the photo opportunity. And if you ever watch or go to commissioner's court, you'll see a lot of the times he seems to be distracted or uninvolved or disengaged or working on something else at the same time. What I bring is 100% focus. I'm not distracted by my private law firm because I'm fully retired. You're going to get 100 to 110% of my attention and my expertise and my experience to help run Dallas County in a more effective and efficient way.
In our last phone call, you said something really interesting. You mentioned that there was too many chiefs and not enough Indians. Can you expand on that?
Sure. I think when you look at an organization, especially governmental organizations, and I come from the business world, so let me kind of do a comparison here. It's, you compare apples to apples or oranges to oranges, but you don't try to compare apples to oranges. But in this case, I want to try to make it clear that when you look at a governmental entity, what we try to look for is are you being efficient and effective with the dollars that are being collected from your residents? They deserve to have the most efficient and most effective system and processes in place. So when I look at the structure of Dallas County, I look at some of what's the ratio of supervisors to subordinates or managers to employees. And in Dallas County, it's like 1 to 4 or 1 to 6, somewhere in that neighborhood. In the business world, we would say that's very, very unmanageable because you need to restructure so that you have more like a 1 to 30 or 1 to 50. You only need one supervisor over a certain number of people. Otherwise, you have a pyramid type of organization that has a lot of inefficiency and ineffectiveness. So what I see is in the county government is a need to restructure the personnel system so that we spread out the supervision responsibilities of those supervisors and managers, and then we repurpose other positions to make them more accountable to the taxpayer, and that we also streamline the government operations. And that way, you reduce the levels of employees, you flatten the organization essentially, and then you get a better sense of how you can you can eliminate costs that way. And that is the one way that we can help reduce the tax burden is by restructuring how we operate. So you take, for example, you have, let's say you have, just like a school board, or a lot of people relate this to a local school system where you have a lot of administrators, but not enough teachers. So we pay the administrators hundreds of thousands of dollars, and we pay the teachers, you know, $60,000 to $80,000. Wouldn't it be better if we paid the teachers $110,000 and pay and have less administrators? And that's essentially what I'm looking at when I look at Dallas County. We have too many administrators and not enough teachers. Is that analogy? So I want to reallocate how we purpose the services and the departments within Dallas County.
What's some of, I just thought of it. What's some of the, what's silly spending that you've seen Jenkins do here for the Dallas County, aside from like paying himself a wonderful bonus?
Well, I think what we have is we have some of the expenses that we have are personnel expenses. We have folks that are making $300,000 to $400,000 a year working for the county government, and I believe that most folks in the county of Dallas County don't expect to have government employees making $300,000 to $400,000 a year. So to me, that's where we need to start looking at where do we look at trimming our budget. And so part of that is we look at things like there's a proposal right now to rebuild our jail, and that means it's probably they're looking. The news says it's about a $5 billion project. That means we have to acquire land and build a new jail. Coming from the business world, I would say that that's probably an overstatement, because when we would renovate one of our stores, our retail stores, we would keep it open, but we would segment the renovation so that only a part of the store was under construction or under renovation, but the rest of the store was operational. We could do the same thing with Blue Sterrett. We can make that, we could segregate it and use common business practices that are out there in the private sector and bring them into the government, and then be more effective and not spend $5 billion of taxpayers' money to where we don't need to. I can't tell you what the cost differential would be, but I believe a $5 billion price tag is exorbitant, and we need to do a lot of due diligence to make sure that that's not something that's being the wool is being pulled over our eyes as residents of Dallas County.
Yeah, 5 billion is a bit much, if you will, for a jail. That's crazy. You also mentioned that there's a lot of neglect in South Dallas. How would you be addressing this issue? What's the plan here?
Well, I've been a resident of South Dallas. I live in Duncanville, Texas, and we were part of the South Dallas strata that goes south of Interstate 20, out south of Interstate 30. And so what I've seen over the last 40 years is the degradation of services here in the South Dallas area. And primarily that's the result of a lot of increase in crime. We need to address public safety. And one of the things that I want to do to revitalize South Dallas is when I was with APHIS, I got to work with the National Retail Federation. The National Retail Federation, as you would think, the name implies, is that it covers all the retail across the United States, both large corporations like J.C. Penney or Macy's or Dillard's, but more importantly, small businesses, small mom and pop businesses. And they have a small business task force. And I've already been in touch with that task force to see if we can make a plan to revitalize South Dallas and bring in the, I guess, outside influencers to come in and make sure that we're doing it right. When you get small businesses working properly, where they don't have to worry about shoplifters coming in and raiding their stores every other day, you get $1,000 loss for a small business 2 or 3 times a month, and you ruin their bottom line. You basically force them to close their doors. So we need to eliminate that. We need to work with the district attorney, prosecute shoplifters, and make sure that those people are held accountable. But the small business growth generates 80% of the economic growth of a community. 80%. So if you can put 80% growth into a small business, to a community through more small businesses, then you build pride, you build a community, you build generational wealth, you build the opportunity for families to bring themselves up from where they are to a level of income and status that they never had before. And we have to engage in some entrepreneurial workshops to teach people how to take their great ideas and turn them into prosperous businesses. And that's what the task force does. It helps people take ownership of what they have and build it into something better and greater. And I'm going to do that for South Dallas. That goes from Balch Springs across, Wilmer, Hutchins, Lancaster, DeSoto, Cedar Hill, Duncanville, and even into Grand Prairie. That's where the growth needs to be really directed.
Yeah, these opportunities, they sound very growth. It sounds like there's a lot of growth. It sounds like there's a lot of opportunity for the communities in the South, especially with crime being so high. But aside from crime being so high, I also noticed that homelessness was a big problem. I want to talk about that for a second because I did some research and allegedly, it started back in 2020 because sure, but we can't always blame everything on COVID. You know what I mean? Like come on
Right.
now. And so it's like, I think it's a little bit deeper than that. And I've heard cases, there was a case in New Mexico, in Las Cruces to be exact, where I heard that the homeless people from big sanctuary cities were being relocated into places like, now Dallas is not a sanctuary city. I don't believe it is.
Well, they operate like a sanctuary city.
Oh,
They do because they don't cooperate with the federal authorities on our folks that are here that are undocumented, or folks would call them folks that have come across the border or other places. So yes, Dallas County and Dallas City do operate as a semi-sanctuary locale. Very little cooperation between local police, sheriff's departments, and the federal government. Case in point is the city of Dallas and the county of Dallas have both refused to accept a $25 million grant from the state and the federal government to help with the I would say the public safety issues that arise from having immigrants here that are undocumented. But so They don't claim to be, but they act like they are. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah. And I do see that. Yeah. I was very curious about that too. Um, but
But
also
there's,
yeah.
if I may, I don't mean to interrupt, but
Yeah. Yeah.
so what we see as a result of the homelessness and the public safety issue is um, big companies like AT&T, Neiman Marcus, the Dallas Stars, Dallas Mavericks have all vacated downtown Dallas because of the homelessness issue and the public safety issue. The employees of AT&T were being accosted by the homeless people, and they were being accosted, with in crime related incidents. So AT&T made a corporate decision to relocate to Frisco because the crime and the homelessness problem in Dallas was overwhelming for their people. It was a safety issue for their company. So we have to address this, and we can't turn a blind eye to what is the reality. Now, folks are going to look at this and give you statistics that are saying, "Oh, everything's improving." Well, if it was improving, we wouldn't be losing these types of mega companies and having the downtown area implode on itself because of the homelessness. I would just encourage you to look around, go downtown Dallas, look around and see how many homeless people you see. Watch on the corners, you see the baskets, you see them. Now, unfortunately, some of those folks are there because they really can't do anything else about it. We know there's a program in San Antonio called Haven for Hope that has done remarkable work with getting folks that were homeless back into their homes, into their families, and back into society. They have a success rate of about 55 to 65% of all the folks that come through their program getting rehabilitated to become, you know, citizens of the community for producing things and making them a viable part of that community. We could do the same thing in Dallas County. We just need to get, and Haven for Hope is like a public private venture where you get folks that are outside the government working together with folks inside the government to make things better for those people that are homeless. And some are there because they choose to be there. Others are there because of either a drug addiction or spousal abuse, or they're running away from something or mental illness. But those issues are treatable if we would just handle it correctly. Throwing more money at it, just throwing money at it and saying it's we're going to cure it is not the solution. There has to be a more passionate way to make this a solution, and we need to involve more of the community. You know, sometimes the government is looked at as, okay, we're the big brother, we're going to take care of everything. The government has a responsibility to fix every problem. That's not the truth. Private sector has is just as much responsibility to help fix social issues as the government. The government should just be here to provide basic services to you and me. They're not our sugar daddy. They're not here to fix everything that may be broken in society. And a lot of people look to the government to fix things. And I want to make sure that we're not overtaxing our residents in Dallas to fix things that others should be fixing and the government should not be fixing.
Definitely getting to the root of the issue of why these homeless people are going through what they're going through, addictions, like you said, running away, or sometimes they just want to be there, point blank, period. Like, for example, in LA, well, that's a very special case, actually. And yeah, it was other independent journalists, they went out into the homeless, well, specifically Skid Row. I'm sure you've seen the interviews where they just confess, like, yeah, we're paid to be homeless and they
Yes.
just stay in the streets, which is ridiculous. And well, speaking of LA, the last time we spoke, you also mentioned that if we do not take initiative, you warned that we could mirror cities like Minneapolis or LA. So what's the turning point for Dallas County?
Well, I'm going to back up a little bit on that one, because what I was trying to show when we talked before was when we look at Dallas County, we don't know where the tax dollars are going. So they come into the county government, they put together a budget, then they spend the money. Well, where do they spend the money? There's not a lot of transparency or accountability. And so what I want to do is make sure that we have a clear record of where the money is coming from. It's pretty easy to know where it's coming from, but it's not so clear as where it's going and how it's being spent. So there's a need to have a what I call a forensic audit of all Dallas County departments. I want to know where the money is going and making sure it's not going to places that it shouldn't. And in order to do that, there's a couple things, tools that we have at our disposal. One is, like I said, a forensic audit. Another is implementing zero-based budgeting, where every year you have to justify your budget. You just don't add 3 to 4% of last year's budget to this year's budget and say,
Mm.
oh, that builds in inflation, that builds in opportunities to misuse the money. And when you get to that point, you're not sure, there's no transparency for all those dollars. So you implement these two things, but the turning point is knowing where the money is actually going. So in Minneapolis, San Francisco, LA, Portland, Seattle, heaven forbid, New York City, the money that was being distributed by county governments and city governments was going to what we call non-governmental organizations, or NGOs. And many of those NGOs were set up just to receive money from the county government with no intention of ever using it for its intended purpose. So you have to go in and, you know, and look at where the money's going and make sure that there's no waste and there's no abuse. And you eliminate the waste, you eliminate the abuse, and what you get is a lower tax burden for the residents of Dallas County, so they don't have to pay as much taxes. You don't sacrifice any central services, but you just eliminate waste. I believe we could eliminate enough waste and abuse in county government to reduce your tax burden by somewhere between 15 and 20%. That's money back in your pocket as a Dallas County resident for you to spend the way you want to and not let the government spend your money the way it wants to. So the turning point right now is for Dallas County residents. Do you want to be the next Minneapolis? Do you want to be the next LA or New York City? And if so, you can continue with the current administration that you have, because they're going to continue to give you empty, meaningless promises about what's being done. Or you can look at a change and get someone like myself that's going to come in. We're going to look at everything. We're going to examine everything. We're going to hold people accountable. And you're going to have a transparent view of where your tax dollars are going, with my promise that you're going to have your tax rate reduced. Money's going to come back to you that you can spend this with in your discretion without having the government take your money and spend it unwisely. So the turning point right now is November the 3rd, when you have the opportunity to keep what you want, what you have, or change, get something refreshing and new, accountable and transparent that's going to deliver savings to your pocket.
Amen. We love savings. We all love that. Colonel, where can we learn more about your involvement and your campaign?
So my website is mikefordallas.com. It's MikeFordallas.com. It's my website. Please go there, look at it. My platform's outlined there, from fiscal responsibility to reducing crime to emergency management, transparency, and then being available to anybody and everybody. I guess the last thing I want to say is I want to represent everybody within Dallas County. I don't care if you're a Democrat, Republican, Independent, Libertarian, or whatever party you want. I don't care what your background is. I don't care if you come from, wherever. I want to represent you and make your life better than it was before. I want to make Dallas County the best county in Texas. And I think with your help, I can do that.
Amazing. Colonel Mike Immler, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. And God bless America and God bless Texas.
Amen. Thank you.